Hey everyone, it's Miss Spencer. Today we'll be learning how to round whole numbers and decimals. We're going to start by rounding the number 83 to the nearest tens place. First, what we're going to do is underline the place value that we're rounding to. Since we're rounding to the nearest tens place, we're going to underline the digit in the tens place. We can see that the 8 is in the tens place, so we're going to underline the 8. Now what we do is look at the digit to its right. So I'm going to use the arrow to look to the digit to its right and see that that digit is 3. So I'm going to circle the 3 so I know what to focus on. Now remember the phrase, 4 or less, let it rest, 5 or more, raise the score. Well, 3 ones falls in between 4 or less. So that means that the number 8 tens is going to rest at 8 tens instead of going to 9 tens. So our number 83 rounds down to 8 tens or 80. 83, when rounded to the nearest tens place, rounds to 80. Now let's try another number. We have 1 and 35 hundredths, and we're rounded to the nearest tenths place. Once again, we're going to underline the place value we're rounding to, which is the 3 in the tenths place. Now, remember that in the number 1 and 35 hundredths, there isn't just 3 tenths, it's actually 13 tenths, because this 1 represents 10 tenths. So we have 10 tenths and then 3 more tenths. So in this entire number, we actually have 13 tenths. So I'm going to actually underline the number 13 tenths. Our number is either going to round down to 13 tenths or up to 14 tenths. So I'm going to look to the digit to the right of the tenths place, which would be the 5 in the hundredths place. I'm going to use the arrow so I know which direction I'm looking at. I can see that we're going to be looking at the 5 in the hundredths place. I'll circle the 5 in the hundredths place. Now remember the phrase, 4 or less, let it rest, 5 or more, raise the score. Well, 5 hundredths falls in between the category of 5 or more. So that means 13 tenths is going to round up to 14 tenths. We can write 14 tenths as 1 and 4 tenths. It's really important to remember that whatever is before the place value we're rounding to, we include that as well, because it's really not just 4 tenths in the number, there's 14 tenths. So 1 and 35 hundredths, when rounded to the nearest tenths place, is rounded to 14 tenths or 1 and 4 tenths. Let's try one more like this. We have 24 and 8 tenths rounded to the nearest whole number. When we're rounding to the nearest whole number, that's the same as rounding to the ones place. So we're first going to underline the ones place. We can see that there's a 4 in the ones place. But remember, in the number 24, there's not just 4 ones, there's actually 24 ones because the 2 in the tens place represents 20 ones. So we have 20 ones here plus another 4 ones here. And the entire number 24 and 8 tenths, we have 24 ones. So I'm going to underline 24. We know our number is either going to round down to 24 or up to 25. We're going to look at the digit to the right of the ones place to know if we're rounding down to 24 or up to 25. I'm going to use the arrow to know which direction I'm looking at. I can see that we're going to look at the 8 that's in the hundredths place. I'm sorry, the 8 that's in the tenths place. So here we have 24 and 8 tenths. We can see that 8 tenths falls in the category of 5 or more. That means our number is going to round up to 25. So 24 and 8 tenths rounds up to 25. Finally, let's go ahead and try to find the smallest number that's going to round up to 2 and the biggest number or largest number that's going to round down to 2. We can say that the smallest number is known as our minimum and the largest number is known as our maximum. we're going to use this line plot to help us here. So we put 2 at the center because this is the number we're rounding to. Since the 2 is in the ones place, we're going to take away 1 1 to know the start of the number line, and we're going to add one more 1 to know the end of our number line. 1 less than 2 ones would be 1 1. So we're going to start our number line at 1 1, and now we're going to add 1 to 2 to note this end of our number line. 2 ones plus one more 1 would be 3 ones. Now that we know the start and end of our number line, let's find the midpoint. The midpoint between 1 and 2 would be 1 and 5/10. The midpoint between 2 and 3 would be 2 and 5/10. So let's start by finding the smallest number that's going to round up to 2. The midpoint is a good place to start. Here we have 1 and 5/10. We're either going to round down to 1 or up to 2. We're going to look at the 5 that's in the tens place to decide. Well, the 5/10 falls in the category of 5 or more raise the score. So 1 and 5/10 rounds up to 2. Let's see if we had 1 and 4/10, if that would also round up to 2. Here's 1 and 4/10. Once again, this number is going to either round down to 1 or up to 2. Well, the 4 in the tens place falls in the category of 4 or less, let it rest. So 1 and 4/10 would actually round down to 1. So that means that the smallest number that's still going to round up to 2 would be 1 and 5/10. So the minimum is 1 and 5/10, or the midpoint between 1 and 2. Finally, let's find the maximum, or the largest number that's going to round down to 2. Let's start with the midpoint here. We have 2 and 5/10. So we know we're going to either round down to 2 or up to 3. We're going to look at the 5 in the tens place to decide. Well, 5/10 falls in the category of 5 or more raise the score. So that means that 2 and 5/10 would round to 3. Oh, but we want to round down to 2. So what we're going to do is take away 1/10 and see if this will round down to 2. Now we have 2 and 4/10. Well, 2 and 4/10, we can look at the tens place to decide if we're going to round down to 2 or up to 3. The 4 in the tens place falls in the category of 4 or less, let it rest. So that means that 2 and 4/10 rounds down to 2. So the largest number, or the maximum, that will round down to 2 is 2 and 4/10.